Today we're going to try out some beef hash. I'm on a journey to discover what goes into the food we eat, why it matters, and how we can use this knowledge to make our own cooking taste better. After being diagnosed with 17 food allergies, I'm determined to relearn how to cook, rethink how to eat, and reimagine what mealtime looks like. Hash is a pretty simple meal, usually designed to use up extra beef or onions or potatoes or any leftover vegetables that you might have. You usually mix them together and then fry them up to make something good. One of the nice things about hash is how simple and flexible it is. Depending on what you have, you can switch certain ingredients for others or arrange things to be what you really enjoy in the dish. So I have a couple of things here in front of me that we are going to go ahead and see what we make from. So what I have here is some ground beef. Now you can use any beef that is already cooked, made for tacos or some other dinner, and you can actually reuse that beef in a hash. Here I've got some fresh beef that I'm going to cook up, but it works just as well either way. To add to the hash, I have some potatoes. I personally enjoy these petite gold potatoes. They are golden potatoes, but a little bit smaller than the ones that you would normally buy in the store. I choose to go with gold potatoes because of the way that I'm going to cook them, but I'll go a little bit more into depth about that later. And of course, no breakfast would be complete without some onion. Those are the three basic ingredients to the hash, and everything else is either going to be a seasoning or a topping. For seasonings, I have some very simple choices here. For the beef, I'm just going to put in a little bit of garlic powder. And then on top, I'm just going to go with some basic salt and pepper. And finally, to top off the dish, I'm just going to stick on some romaine lettuce. And we're actually going to look over a nicer way to cut this to make it look good. We're going to start with the potatoes because they take the longest to cook. I'm going to place these potatoes in a bowl so that way I can wash them. And you should always wash potatoes after bringing them home because they tend to be covered in dirt and other things. I'm just going to give the potatoes a good rinse, although you can also wash them with some soap. Just make sure that you wash away all the soap before cooking them. A strainer is really handy here, although you can pour the water from the bowl if you are careful. We're going to put the potatoes in a pot with enough water to make sure that all of the potatoes are completely covered. Potatoes that stick above the water may not get cooked properly. I'm going to set my heat towards the high end because we want to boil the water for these potatoes. Potatoes this small usually take 30 to 40 minutes to boil, although if you're using larger potatoes, it may take longer. We're going to place the beef into the pan so that we can brown it. Notice how I'm using the spatula to break up the beef and spread it around the pan. This will ensure that it cooks more evenly. We're going to season the beef at this step. If you don't add anything, it's going to taste rather bland. An important point here is to make sure that you are seasoning the beef more heavily than you would do right before eating it. This is because some of the seasoning will be lost in the cooking process. Now we're not going to leave the beef on the stove too long, basically until all the pink goes away. That is because we are browning the beef rather than cooking it. The point of browning it first is to make sure that it is cooked all the way once we combine all of our other ingredients. Of course, if you're recycling beef from a previous meal, hopefully it's cooked all the way already, and you can skip this step. Next, we're going to dice the onion. Dicing an onion is often considered one of the essential skills for any chef or home cook to know. There are a bunch of different ways to do this, but I've found this technique to be the easiest. The first thing to note is which side of the onion is which. The hairier part is called the root. We're going to leave the root on as a handle, and also because it is the part of the onion that when cut into will produce the strongest gases and make you cry the most. Start by cutting off the other side so that you have some flat surface to work with. Then, cut the onion in half. I'm only going to use half of an onion for this hash, although you're free to add more if you would like. Place the half of the onion face down like this. And we're going to start by making some horizontal cuts into the onion. Notice that I'm stopping short of the root and not actually going all the way to the end when making these cuts. This ensures that each of the pieces stays attached to the onion and will make the rest of the dicing much easier. Next, I'm going to make a horizontal cut into the onion like this. It is best to do this at a slight downward angle, and of course be very careful as this is one of the easiest parts to cut yourself during. Finally, we're going to start making cuts perpendicular to the first ones that we made. You will see as you make these cuts, the onion begins to fall apart into the finely diced pieces we're looking for. As you get near the end, it can be easier to flip the onion on its side and continue cutting, and then flip it back. This will provide a flat surface for the knife to go into while you cut towards the end. We're now going to put the diced onion into a small bowl. Notice that I'm using the back of the knife rather than the sharp edge to scrape the onion off of the cutting board. Doing so will help protect the sharpness of your knife. Next, we're going to prepare the lettuce. I prefer fresh lettuce, which must be washed first. Of course, if you're using bagged and pre-washed lettuce, you can skip the washing. I'm going to demonstrate a cutting technique here known as chiffonade. Chiffonade is a cutting technique that produces long, thin strips. To do this, go ahead and stack the leaves of lettuce. We want them all to be about flat with each other. Once they are stacked, go ahead and roll them up. And now use the knife to simply make thin cuts across the rolled leaves. We are going to discard the more yellow stem side, but you'll notice that I left them on for now because they are useful as a handle when cutting the rest of the leaves. And now we have some chiffonade cut lettuce that we will transfer into a bowl to use later. The easiest way to tell if your potatoes are done cooking is to stick a fork in them. The fork should go in pretty easily, like sticking a fork into butter. If you have to push really hard or there's more of a crunch, you may want to have the potatoes cook longer. Once the potatoes are done cooking, we're going to take them off the heat. Separate the potatoes from the water and leave the potatoes to cool outside of the water. This is important because the potatoes themselves have been boiling, which means they're extremely hot, and attempting to cut them at this point would only cause you to burn yourself. Once the potatoes have cooled enough, we're going to go ahead and cut them into quarters. If you're using larger potatoes, you're going to need to cut them smaller. The goal here is to have them a relatively small size, so that way they fit with the rest of the ingredients into the pan and cook nicely. At this point, you should notice cutting through the potato is a lot like cutting through butter or soft tofu. We will also put these potatoes into a bowl to use later. One of the keys of a successful hash is to make sure that you add everything in the correct order, since everything has different cooking times. Potatoes take the longest to cook, hence why we actually boiled them before putting them with the rest of the ingredients. Similarly, we browned the meat first if it was raw, in order to make sure it's thoroughly cooked in the final dish. We will start by sauteing the onion. To do this, go ahead and add some olive oil to the pan. We're going to turn the heat up to just below high. Once the oil has started smoking, go ahead and add the onions. It is important that you wait until the pan is very hot before adding the onions, or they will not saute properly. Also pay attention to how many onions you're trying to saute at once. If there are too many onions in the pan, they will not saute but rather stew in the liquid that's released. The amount shown here is a little bit much for this pan, but it'll work for this recipe. Once the onions are sauteed and starting to brown, we're going to go ahead and add the potatoes. We'll also add some extra oil to help the potatoes fry. you should notice some browning on the edges of the potatoes. This is what we're looking for and will help produce a lot of good flavor. Once most of the potatoes have started to brown, we're going to add in the meat. Go ahead and mix everything as it's cooking to make sure everything is cooked thoroughly. At this point, almost everything is cooked, so it should only take a few minutes. I left mine on for 2 to 3 minutes like this. Once you're satisfied with how cooked everything is, go ahead and remove it from the heat. Plating refers to how you arrange and present the food on the plate, and for this dish, I'm going to keep it rather simple. I'm going to take some of the hash and place it on the plate and gather it all up in the center. This forms a nice little mound with the edges of the plate clear. On top of the mound, I'm going to place some of the lettuce that we chopped up earlier. Finally, we'll top with some salt and pepper. Now this dish feels like it could use something to top it off, like a cherry on top. Something purple or red would stand out nicely and complement the rest of the dish. I reached out to all of you on Facebook, which you can find me by searching for Cooking With Them, or by clicking or tapping on the card up above. I'll go ahead and include a link to the post in the description for the video. And I got some fantastic feedback for what might finish this dish off well. Some of the ideas included cilantro sauce, green onion, constellation tomatoes, pickled onions, avocado, and some purple onions. I'll go ahead and try some of these out when I make this dish in the future, and post photos to let you know how it went. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you go ahead and like, comment, and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of my future videos. I've got a couple of colorful treats planned for Pride Month coming up, and you're not going to want to miss out. See you next time.